Hi, welcome to the Blaze Hackman podcast, episode number 3. You may wonder what this is. That's a pop filter. And could use a sock, but this is a bit overwhelming. But it does the job. So maybe in the future I'll get something less confronting. But yeah, I've looked at a few podcasts and look at the top of the pops like Joe Rogan, Jocko, the guys I listen to. You really have to try and find an angle with the camera where it doesn't block the person's face. And this is the best angle I can come up with. And this microphone's kind of quite directional. Some microphones you can sort of talk at it from any angle and it'll pick up the message. But with this one, it's more a case of, it has to be, pointing at the sensor. And so this is the best angle. So if it looks like I'm talking to a rabbit, I kind of am. So today, what are we going to talk about? I'm trying to I think you got to be wary of lecturing people, but it's a sort of a quasi lecture. But I really think the world has missed out on the significance, maybe in Australia more so, of the launch of Falcon Heavy by Elon Musk. And it's really bizarre because I work in the media sometimes, and walking around various radio stations that I've had to work with, or other media outlets, and really in Australia there's just no awareness of the Falcon Heavy launch or its significance, which only happened a few days ago. And I have some explanations as to why it is so. That I normally wouldn't go on about something like this, but I just think it's kind of perverse that people spend so much time, myself included, on Instagram, Facebook, whatever other social media platforms, Twitter, and they're sort of posting stuff that's really essentially worthless, and then something I think is amazingly worthwhile has gone completely over the heads, literally and physically, metaphorically, of so many people. I don't know if it's a generational thing, it's a millennial thing. I think there's actually that's unfair. It actually comes down to the fact that really with the space program, unless you put a person in a rocket and send them to another planet or a satellite like the moon, they're not really going to care. Let's be honest, no one really cares. Now, the thing about Elon Musk is that he makes space sexy. He makes it interesting. And he's done something that I don't think a space agency like NASA will be capable of. Because he's basically, it's all internal funding that got Falcon Heavy off the ground. And this has been a journey for him over the last 10 years. I've read the book over summer, or most of the book. His biography, if you get a chance to look at it. And I think that Musk can make decisions that you couldn't with a normal government agency. For example, what he did was he launched his Tesla. So this is genius on a number of levels. He's launched his Tesla into space because they needed a payload to test the rocket. And that payload is usually a block of concrete or something pretty boring. And he thought, let's make it interesting. So not only has he made it interesting, I mean, if people are on Instagram, they should think this is pretty smart. But he's kind of cross-promoted because he's launched a Tesla into space. And not only that, but he's also combined that. So you've got this, as he described, this absurdity of this car floating in space with David Bowie as the soundtrack. I think Space Oddity is going to be playing on the radio of the Tesla. There's Life on Mars, which is another Bowie song, which he used in the trailer for the launch as well. So he's kind of, and there's always been this fascination certainly with certain forms of art, expression, whatever you want to call it, with space. And there's always been people like Isaac Asimov who've gone on, who've made speculative fiction, who've predicted futures. Good science fiction, I think, predicts the future. And he kind of took a prediction, or almost like fantasy from Bowie, and then made it a reality by putting the dummy in there as well. And then the dummy is the wearing the spacesuit that SpaceX designed themselves, and they said they didn't want to design something that was too cumbersome, but they also wanted something that was very cool at the same time. Then he put a Hot Wheels car in there as well, with on the dashboard of the Tesla, with another little Tesla with another little spaceman inside it. So it's audacious what he's done. It really is. He's pretty much had a bit of fun. And I think that this is the permission you can get in the private sector. This is the permission you can have when you're self-made. And this is the way to engage people and get their imagination fired. You sort of combining technology with a bit of imagination and a bit of fun. And so, by all rights, this should have been very interesting to people. But it really, in Australia, I did some notifications on Facebook and very little interest. Some people didn't even know it was on. So I don't think it's something you necessarily have to be a space zealot to realize what was going on. But the reason that I think you should, and I hate people that say you should be interested in something, but there's just so many things to gain out of this. I thought it was a massive entrepreneurial act that someone who had no experience with rockets 15 years ago had an imagination and went out there and pretty much just materialized a dream or a vision and made it happen, obviously with large division of labor and help and a lot of talented people. So that should be celebrated. And once again, not constricted by the rules of... This is the problem with NASA and those agencies, is that there were some people on Twitter saying, oh, why didn't Elon set up a science project? Because they didn't want to set up a science project from schools. He didn't want to fulfill your politically correct ideal of what he should do. And it's easy for you to speculate now, sitting in your office somewhere, about what he should have done. He set up a car because he wanted to. He needed a payload. It was probably going to be expensive to set up science projects and to be beholden to the expectations of other people. And I think great entrepreneurs aren't held to the expectations of others. They create the future. And in a way, he's done that. He's created or stepped into a future that people have speculated about. So that's really interesting to me. And I think that one of the really telling moments, that there's a great conference he did a year ago about making life multiplanetary, turning humans into multiplanetary species, if you look that up on YouTube. And someone afterwards, admittedly a lot of psychos were in the audience asking questions, a lot of Star Trek fans. Nothing wrong with Star Trek. But really, the people who are at the coalface making the rockets are very different to the people who are attending. A lot of very weird questions. And one of the questions was, how much training do I need to go up in the BFG? No, that's Big Friendly Giant. BFR, Big Fucking Rocket. That's the next level of Musk's enterprise. These are the rockets that he plans to send heavy payloads to Mars. And he said, well, you can do, a few days, maybe a bit more. And I thought there was just a beautiful simplicity to that, because if you look at NASA, they go, you have to be an astronaut, you need 5,000 hours flying, and then you need to, go through the astronaut selection program, or if you're not a commanding officer on the shuttle, then we need you to have a PhD in microbiology, and we need to vet you, and we need to go through, 100 weeks of progress, and you'll narrow it down to 12 candidates, and then 4 of those will be chosen. So he didn't do any of that. He just said, you can do a few days, do a bit more, because I think what he does is he simplifies, and he makes his space sexy, he makes it interesting, and he's doing what NASA, I just think they're beholden to government expectations, beholden to funding bodies, and they really have to be accountable, and there's this paranoia about having to prove and get results for the outlay. So there's massive caution, and which is good in some ways, but I think it can hold you back. Whereas Elon Musk had deep pockets and blew up a lot of rockets on the way to the Falcon Heavy launch. So pretty much the private sector can get away with and do things the public sector can't. But he made it interesting again. And then making the rockets land was like something out of an Asimov novel. And so I think that some people are still in this mind frame of, oh, what about people starving in other countries and we're out there, doing this ridiculous enterprise and we won't see results for years and years. But I think that, you've got to have the human spirit and you've got to have this sense of adventure and you've got to find new horizons, new civilizations, and the payoff will be down the track, and all the technology that comes with that, and all the employment that comes with that locally, all the invention that comes with that. And so there is a greater good down the track. It fires up people's imagination, and it motivates people. And I think it was just an incredibly amazing act on so many levels. And to have someone like a Columbus thinking in that way, well, let's go to Mars, let's try it out, let's blow up a few rockets on the way. Well, what if I launched my car? I mean, this is outrageous. And he actually did it. He followed through. And it was just a mind-boggling moment when Falcon X had taken off, and it was about 25-30 seconds after takeoff, and it was just blasting into the stratosphere, and the shot of it was just incredible. I mean, pretty much you've got the boosters themselves are 16 stories high, so it's probably 25 stories up to the top of the fairing where Starman was sitting. And I think it was just an overwhelming, just a elation-filled victory for Musk and for people and technology. And so when you see people the next day blissfully underwear, still taking selfies. Look, I've taken selfies, but I just think on this one day, people were so unaware. It was just staggering. I also think it's going to be hilarious that if there is some kind of life found out there, that there's going to be a lot of rewrites in religion, or a lot of deep thought out explanations about, oh, yes, well, it says in this part of the sacred manuscript that this was going to happen, and therefore I'll interpret that as alien life forms. Whereas previously I've said that for hundreds of years they didn't exist, we're the only ones. I got that bit wrong. So you were wrong. I misinterpreted that script, and now I will, spit it out to make it convenient. So, and that's what I like. I like the way that this really is beyond any kind of. There was almost a sort of religious experience for me watching it happen, and I think that this is the first significant step to going to Mars.